Hello again, and welcome to my 7th review of the 2nd season. And once again, I'm on no sleep, so apologies now for all the words I'm sure I'm going to trip over. But anyway, as I always start, if you haven't watched my reviews before, I'm sure you want to know if I'm a book person or a show person. And I watched the show before I ever read the books. I've read the first 2.5 books as of now. Well, 2.25 books as of now, and The World of Ice and Fire, which is the history. So, I consider myself a show watcher who just reads the books for added information, and as I said, I'm only about 24 chapters into book 3. So, I haven't read 4 or 5 at all, and I still have a lot to go in 3. So, you don't have to worry about me giving away book spoilers or I also try not to give away anything from later seasons in case this is the first time you've watched the series. That way you'll be safe from those spoilers too. I do sometimes mention something's important, and if you should pay attention to it. And I give some of the history that pertains to the scenes on the show that you don't necessarily get from the show. So that is how I do the reviews. And as I said, this is the 7th review of Season 2. It's the episode called A Man Without Honor. And there's one scene in this episode I like a lot too. So I'm still a little curious why there's people that say they don't like Season 2, because I can think of a lot of things I liked about Season 2. So anyway, we're going to see what you guys think about it, and we're going to get started with the first scene, which is, let's see, Theon is waking up after his night with Osha when she snuck out and then killed his guard, and then took off with Bran and Rickon and Hodor and the wolves. So this is Theon waking up to realize she's gone, and then he goes outside, and his men tell him that not only is Osha gone, but the 2 Stark boys are gone, Hodor is gone, and the 2 wolves are gone. So things are going well for Theon still, with his lovely taking over of the home where he grew up and the family that raised him. Imagine how that could have possibly went wrong, right? So anyway, he is taking it out on his men. He's very annoyed with them and making fun of them for losing 2 little boys and a half-wit is what he calls Hodor. And then, of course, they mention, well, you were with the wildling, so you weren't paying attention either. And so they're all going well, or getting along well. And then he decides he's going to go hunt for the boys. They couldn't have gotten far, of course, he believes. And he takes Lewin along because they don't say it on the show, but it's kind of clear in the story that the reason he takes Lewin along is because he doesn't trust Lewin to be left there alone without any of the Ironborn there to keep him in line, keep him from sending out ravens and calling in reinforcements and all that stuff. So he takes Lewin along just because of that. And they spend most of the day hunting for the boys, and they're not having a lot of luck. And Theon's asking Lewin along the way if he's enjoying his first hunt. And one of the few funny Lewin lines, he said, so far hunting seems a lot like riding. And Theon says, yes, but at hunting there's blood at the end. And of course that gets to Lewin because he doesn't want to see the Baron and Rickon get hurt. And he says to Theon that they're only little boys and that he shouldn't, take it out on them and be cruel to them because they are just little boys. And Theon says that he was a little boy too when the Starks got him, and he didn't run away like they did. Well, I'm pretty sure the Starks didn't quite treat Theon the way that Theon has treated the boys and the other people of Winterfell. Remember, he cut off Master-at-Arms' head in the last episode. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a bit of a different situation. But yeah, Theon says that when he was a little boy, he was there, and he didn't want to be there, but he didn't run away. So that's his, reasoning for why he thinks he has the right to do whatever it takes to punish the boys But he claims that if he finds them quick enough, he'll be merciful, because Lewin mentions that they are more used to him alive than dead. And Theon says that they're no use missing, and his big problem is that his sister's going to be there soon. And if his sister gets there and he doesn't have the boys, he's going to look like an even bigger fool and a bigger idiot than he's already looking like for them getting away at all. So it all comes down to his stupid pride again about he wants to catch the boys just so he doesn't look bad, is basically how it's coming across here. But he promises Lewin that he'll be merciful if he finds them soon enough. So, yeah. And, of course, he tells Lewin, oh, cheer up, it's all just a game. So he's still not taking any of this seriously, or at least he's trying to come across like he's not taking any of it seriously. But Lewin is obviously not trusting Theon, imagine that. But Theon claims that it's just a game, and he'll, treat them fairly as long as he doesn't take too long to find them. So how they get treated depends on his ability to find them, I guess. Logic. And speaking of them, we see that the wolves are indeed with them, and they're running ahead, and that actually, it's explained a little better in the show, that the wolves are running ahead because they're depending on the wolves to throw the hounds that Theon's got off the scent, and it actually works really well in the book. The wolves run into the stream, and the hunters follow that trail while they're not even with the wolves. So it does work pretty well. They just don't, explain it that well. That's what they're doing, and why the wolves are not with them. I mean, they're with them, but they're off creating another trail for the hunters to follow. So they're talking about how they should have taken more food away when they left, and Bran didn't want to take too much food or have the people from Winterfell help them because he doesn't want them to be punished. His people, he doesn't want his people to be punished for helping them get away. So he didn't ask his own people for help. And they just took what they could carry and took off. And their food is pretty much not a lot, and they're like surviving on walnuts, and Osha says, you can't survive on walnuts, and they find a farm, and they know the farm, but Bran doesn't want to go there either because he doesn't want to get those people in trouble also. So Bran's being a Stark, doesn't want to get his people in trouble, even if it means his own safety and survival. But then we go back to the north, and Jon and Ygritte, and they're attempting to get back to the Night's Watch, the Crows, as Ygritte calls them. And of course Ygritte's teasing him, which she does a lot, and she was like pushing up against him and asking if he pulled a knife on her in the night and all this stuff, and she's like, well, it can't be the first time you've pressed yourself up against a woman, and she's picking on him. And then when she realizes that he is embarrassed, she's like, wow, you really haven't. And says, so there's no girls at the wall, no wonder you're all so miserable. And she's just, going on, talking about how she's a free woman, and that all he did was swear some oath that means he can never touch a girl, and trying to make him feel like an idiot for being part of the Night's Watch instead of being one of the free people like her. And then they get into a debate about the Night's Watch invading their lands, and Jon saying they're not their lands, and your people come in and they attack us, and they attack my brother, and he's just a little crippled boy. And Ygritte saying, they're not your lands either, you just put up a big wall and said it was yours. And she said that they're both part of the First Men, the Starks and the Wildlings alike, so they have as much right to the land as the Starks do, and the people of the North, and that they're just the same. And then they come to the conclusion of, then why are we fighting each other if we're exactly the same? So basically some sexual harassment on Ygritte's part, some virgin shaming, and then trying to make him feel like an idiot for being in the Night's Watch, and saying, that they shouldn't be fighting each other, and that neither one of them, their people, have more right than the other, and all that. Just a lovely little discussion along the way. And then we go back to Harrenhal, And this is right after Jekken had put the dart in Amory's neck because of Amory catching Arya with the letter, and Arya telling Jekken to kill him. And he put the dart in his neck right as he got to Tywin's door. And the aftermath of that is that Tywin is having his own men hung because he figures that the traitor must be among them, because how else could they have gotten that close to him? And he honestly thinks it was an attempt on his life when Amory was killed. So that's how he's taking it. So he's killing his own men because of that. And he's talking to Mountain Number 2. It's Mountain Number 2. I mentioned in an earlier one, this is the second person who plays the Mountain, and he's going to be played by a third person as well later. And he sends the Mountain away to burn all the villages and burn farms and find out who was helping the assassin, and if it was the Brotherhood and instead of somebody in his own ranks and all that. So he sends him away to rout out the Brotherhood in case it was them instead of one of his own people. And figures somebody must have been helping in order to get that close to him, right? And then the Mountain finally leaves, and he tells Arya to eat because he didn't want his dinner. Arya doesn't want to stay there with him, but he tells her to eat anyway, and he starts going on about how this is going to be his last war, win or lose. And she asks him if he's ever lost before, and he says that he wouldn't be in his current position if he had ever lost before. So he's obviously not taking it very well that he hasn't won yet, and he's actually not winning the battles like he usually does. So he's a little upset. And this is the first time we ever hear it called the War of the Five Kings. And he says that this is going to be the war he's remembered for no matter what he did before. And it will end up being his legacy. And he asks her if she knows what legacy means. And he says it's what you pass down to your children. And then he talks about Harrenhal and some of the background story, which I gave in the previous review, I believe, about Harren the Black and what happened to Harrenhal. And then he follows it up with, this place was supposed to be the best castle in the world, the hardest one to infiltrate, and then Aegon the Conqueror, the first Targaryen king, he changed the rules because he had dragons. And he said that's why everybody knows his name 300 years later. And Arya points out, it wasn't just Aegon. It was Aegon and his sisters. And this is where we get a little bit of history, how Arya actually knows the name of Aegon's two sisters and his two queens, the first two Targaryen queens, Rhaenys and Visenya. And she even knows the names of their dragons. The Visenya rode a dragon named Vhagar, and Rhaenys rode a dragon named Meraxes. And she's talking about them, and she says that Visenya was a great warrior who had a Valyrian steel sword named Dark Sister. And we're getting a little bit of a history lesson, but we're also seeing this is the kind of things that Arya remembers when she thinks about history and how it is possible for a woman to be a great warrior. And she uses Visenya as an example of that. And he says, so you're a student of history. Where'd you learn all about that? And she says that she learned from her father. And he says, he was a well-read stonemason, because she had told him in an earlier episode that her father was a stonemason. And he says that he hasn't met many literate stonemasons, and she's got that great line, have you met many stonemasons, my lord? So, Arya still being Arya. Even when she's undercover, she still has that bit of spark to her. And also part of this scene, he says to her that most girls are interested in the songs about knights and maidens and Florian and Jonquil, and that's a nod to book people, because it's never been mentioned on the show other than this scene. But in all of Sansa's chapters, she's talking about Florian and Jonquil, and he was some knight that saved some maiden, and she's using it to refer to a certain character who we don't really get a lot of that storyline until later in the series, but in her head she's always thinking about Florian and John Keel, and that's a nod to the people who have read the book and know that that's the kind of people that Sansa looks up to, as opposed to Arya, who looks up to Visenya Targaryen and her dragon and her Valyrian steel sword. So, another bit of a play on how incredibly different Sansa and Arya really are. So, anyway, that brings us around to our whole "have you met many stonemasons" line, and he tells her to be careful. He enjoys her, but she should be careful, because she's getting a little bit mouthy with him, a little sarcastic, but it's funny. And again, none of these Tywin and Arya scenes are in the book. They never meet each other in the book. And she's Roose Bolton's cupbearer at Harrenhal. I think Tywin's not even there for most of the time. But at the same time, we get a lot of really fun interactions between them. So even though it wasn't in the book, a lot of people like the Arya and Tywin scenes, except of course the book purists who have a meltdown and want to see her serving Roose and not really having anything interesting going on except for when she finds out about what happens at the end of this episode. That's about the only interesting moment of her being Roose's cupbearer in the book, is when she finds out about Winterfell and then what happens at the end of the episode. But anyway, then we go back to her lovely sister, Sansa. And she runs into the Hound in the hallway, and this is shortly after the riots where Sansa almost got raped and everything, and she says, of course we didn't see that in the book either because it was Tyrion's point of view, I believe, so we didn't really see what happened to Sansa. Apparently in the book she just got pulled off her horse or something. It was nothing really very dramatic, but anyway, she tells the Hound that she should have thanked him for being so brave, and he says that a dog doesn't need courage to chase off rats, and she asks him if he enjoys trying to scare people, and he says no, he enjoys killing people. And he says it's the sweetest thing in the world. And she's just, why are you like this? And he's like, oh, you can't tell me that your father, Ned, never killed anybody. And she said, yes, but it was his duty. He didn't enjoy it. And the Hound says, oh, well, he lied. And he said that, again, killing is the best thing in the world. And she asks him why he's so hateful. And she says that one day, and the Hound tells her that one day she'll be glad of his hateful ways when he's all that stands between her and her precious king. So, kind of another dig at Sansa, which I always enjoy. Anyway, moving on. We go back to the aftermath of the dragon napping. Zaro supposedly demanded, you can hear my sarcasm if you've seen the rest of this episode, which I hope you have, he's demanded a meeting with the 13 to solve this mystery of who stole the dragons. And Dany's not really trusting him at all. She's like, you're one of the 13, and why should I trust you? And he said, oh, that her dragons mean nothing, and he just doesn't want this to happen under his roof, because then his word is no good. And she said, what do you mean the dragons mean nothing? They're the most valuable thing in the world. And that's when he says that, I can't let this happen to you. You're under my protection. She says, well, you can't help me either, and it did happen under your roof, and that's all there is to it. And she takes off, and she's not listening to him at all, because she doesn't trust him. Which she shouldn't. But anyway, then we go back to more Jon and Ygritte walking around, and him trying to get back to his people, and more of their conversation. Yes, this was another thing that was very different in the book. There's barely any, maybe one part of one chapter that Jon and Ygritte were, conversing with each other. And it was basically just a story about Bell the Bard and how he's related to the Starks in some line far back. Not all this stuff, but it's just more of this we're better because we're free stuff, and they don't serve some king, and they chose Mance, and he was a crow, but he wanted to be free, and she's trying to hard sell Jon on joining. Says he's pretty, that all the girls would want him, and that she could teach him, and we get our first you know nothing, Jon's no, which becomes a lovely line that gets repeated many, many times. A lot more times than we hear Dany say, where are my dragons? I think Dany may say that 2.5 times I mean, Gret says you know nothing, Jon Snow, about 850 times. But anyway, then we go back to Robb, and I want to call him Cleos, because that's who he was in the book, but not exactly. This is Alton Lannister, who has returned with the news of how Cersei took Robb's terms when he gave her all those terms that he knew she wouldn't meet. And, of course, she doesn't accept to the terms. And Robb thanks him and puts him back in the cell, and they say there is no cell. And he tells them to put him back in the cell, and he says there is no cell. And, of course, Roose is complaining again about too many prisoners because he just wants to kill all the prisoners. Yeah, Roose doesn't believe in prisoners. He believes in torture, kill, torture, kill, torture, kill, torture, kill. That's Roose. That's Roose's whole family. But, moving on. So, Robb decides to put him in with Jaime. For now, since they're cousins, what could possibly happen there? And Rickard's son, Torrhen, Rickard Karstark's son, Torrhen, is supposed to be guarding them. We'll get back to that later. Then, Talisa again. Talisa again. This is more of her. She comes in, she wants more medicine and supplies, and more of this not my enemies crap because of her running out of supplies because she's helping the Lannisters and the Starks alike. And more of her talking back to Robb about how she doesn't approve of the war. You know, that stuff that would so happen. And then more of her interrupting Robb, and then, of course, apologizing like she just remembered after 4 scenes of talking back to him that she shouldn't be. I mean, I'm all for women's lib, but this wouldn't happen. Anyway. And, of course, Robb is still kissing her butt and, going along with anything she does, and then invites her to come along to get supplies. So he invites her to come with them to the crag to go get supplies. And then we get back to Theon's fruitless hunt. And they found the farm that we saw Osha and company at in the last scene, or the previous scene of this storyline. And the hounds have lost the scent, and that was what I was saying about how the wolves went one direction and the rest of them went another direction to throw off the hounds. And Lewin suggests they start again in the morning, and Theon is not going for that. He says he's going to be treated like a fool if he comes back without the boys. And he's all ticked off at this point because it's been all day, it's almost nighttime, and he's saying, once I have them, ... And Lewin's just looking at him like, you said you'd be merciful. And I believe we've heard that said to Joffrey in season 1. But anyway, you know what happened with Joffrey. And Theon says it's better to be cruel than weak. Yeah. So Theon and Joffrey, a lot alike. And Dagmar then finds the walnut shells, and they decide that the boys were here because of that, and he sends Lewin away. And of course Lewin is not happy about this, because he thinks that means that they have found the scent of the boys and they're going to catch them. And Theon has made it clear that he's not going to play nice anymore, because it took him too long to find any clue or hint of where the boys were, so because of his ineptitude, the boys have got to pay. And Lewin is not thrilled with this idea. But he does, he sends Lewin back, and then goes over to have quiet conversation with Dagmar about what their plan's going to be now that they found some clue, allegedly, about the boys. So that's what is going on there, and we will see later in the episode how that turns out, of course. And let me see. After this, our next scene... Hey, the Kraken shield looks cool. Hate the Greyjoys, but the Kraken shield looks really cool. But anyway, our next scene is going to be back to Karth and Dany staring at her empty dragon cages. And Jorah returns at this point, and she talks about how Irie's dead and Doria's missing, which is kind of a flip, because in the book, Doria died of some fever or starvation or something on the way to Karth. And a quarter of the way into book 3, and Irie and Jaquie are her only handmaidens. In this one, Erie got killed, Doria went missing, and we do find out later what's up with Doria. And Jaquie has just disappeared. I'm guessing maybe she was supposedly one of the people that took off before Danny walked into the fire. But I'm not really sure what happened to Jaquie. I'm sure it was a case of the actress getting another job or something, but Jaquie has disappeared. And Erie's dead, and Doria's missing. And in the book, Doria died before they even got there, and Erie and Jaquie are still with her in book 3. But anyway, yeah, Garth's storyline's very different, but it ends the same way, other than the one huge thing they cut out, just in another one of my videos. But anyway, Danny's taking the blame for her people all getting killed, and Jorah's taking the blame. He says he shouldn't have left her there with these people, and she says, who are these people? He says, well, they're not to be trusted. And Danny says, well, who is to be trusted? Because at this point, Danny's very cynical, because everybody's betrayed her in one way or another. And she says, well, who are my people? And Jorah says that they're in Westeros, and she says the people in Westeros don't even know that she's alive. And Viserys thought that they'd be waving dragon banners and waiting for their return, but Viserys was an idiot. And so, yeah, this is true. And Jorah says, oh, well, trust me. And before he can finish the sentence, she says, and there it is, that word. And she says she doesn't have room for trust. And this is where you can see that she's really just sick of all the betrayal and all the backstabbing at this point. And Jorah says, you're too young to be. And, of course, he reaches for her shoulder. And that's where she says, and you're too familiar. Because she's still got that seed planted in her head where Zara told her that Jorah was in love with her. So I guess that's their way of portraying this. But it was not even just that in the book, with just Jorah touching her shoulder, that kind of clued her into it. In the book, he actually tried to kiss her, or did kiss her, when she was trying to get dressed, and said he wanted to marry her. So he came on way, way stronger in the book than just touching her shoulder. So I guess this is how we're getting her to the point where she does know how Jorah really feels about her, because in the book she definitely knows, because he literally came on to her and, grabbed her and kissed her and proposed, basically. So I guess this is how in the show they're getting her to the point where she does know how Jorah actually feels about her. And he does back off, though, when she says that he's too familiar, which is not nearly as familiar as he was in the book. And he says that no one can survive without help, and asks her to let him help her, and just to tell him how to help her. And all she says is, find my dragons. That's how you can help me. Because she's at the point now where she doesn't trust anybody except herself and her dragons, because she's been betrayed too many times. So that's what we get from all of that. And then more of Jon and Ygritte. And Ygritte sexually harassing Jon some more. And saying that she'll claim that, that Jon had his way with her, and all this other stuff, because she realizes Jon's lost and she's just basically distracting him at this point. And she'll tell people, that they were doing things together, and that's why they were off and away. And she says that since it'll be her word against his, they should just do it. And Jon's still not giving in to her. She is trying. She's trying. And she says she figures, tempt him with freedom, tempt him with sex, tempt him with whatever. She's really wanting him to join the wildlings here. You get that clearly, but he's turning her down at every corner. And, sticking to his honor and his oaths, because he is a Stark. We won't talk again about the theories of how that happened, but anyway. So it's still him sticking to his honor and sticking to his oaths. And of course, when she sees that she's not distracting him, she takes advantage of his embarrassment and his discomfort at the things she's saying, and takes off over the hill. He chases her for a little while, and then he realizes that she knew all along that they were surrounded by wildlings, and that's why she was doing this whole thing about trying to get him to join, because she knew that her people were all around them, and she was trying to convince him to join because she knew that they were surrounded. And if Jon joined them, and that would be about his only chance. Because she knew the whole time that her people were right near them, and she was just trying to convince him to join them until the time was right for her people to show themselves. And since that didn't work, well, here we go. Guess what? Here's my people, and we've been surrounding you this whole time. And of course she adds, you should have taken me while you had the chance, Jon Snow. So she was trying to get him to come over to their side because she knew all along that it was only a matter of moments before she'd be back with her people. And she was just trying to convince Jon to go back with her. So that's what that whole thing was about. And, of course, now Jon is surrounded by wildlings. And, well, I guess we'll have to see what happens with that storyline, won't we? And then we go back to Sansa having nightmares about the riot. Except in her nightmares, she almost gets killed instead of almost getting raped. And then she wakes up, and she dreamed in the nightmare that she got stabbed with a sword, and when she wakes up she's got blood all over her. That's because she's finally got her period. Oh my. Yeah, she's not happy about that. So she freaks out when she realizes this, and she starts trying to cut away the stain, and in the book she actually sets her whole freaking bed on fire or something. But then I guess they didn't want to start fires. Too many effects for that. But so she tries to cut away the stain, and then Shae walks in on this and realizes what's happening. And Shae decides to try to help her. And yes, book people, Shae wasn't Sansa's handmaiden. She was the handmaiden for Lawless Stokeworth, who's been mentioned maybe once on the show, but she was in the book a little more. But anyway, in the book, Sansa had different handmaiden every 2 weeks because Cersei didn't trust any of them. But moving on. So Shae comes in, since Shae is Sansa's handmaiden in the show, and she tries to help Sansa by trying to help her hide the mattress and everything, because of course we all know what this means, that once this has happened, then the marriage to Joffrey's going to get pushed ahead. And Shae tries to help her get rid of the bed and everything, or the mattress, and then one of the other handmaidens comes in. We're going to see this chick again. I don't think they say her name, but she's obviously a Cersei spy. We get that later because there's another issue where she's spying on people around Cersei. But so Shae sees her, and she goes after her to make sure she doesn't tell anybody what's happened here, trying to get buy Sansa some more time before she has to marry Joffrey and everything. And Shae chases her down the steps and holds a knife to her throat and says, "You're not going to tell anybody anything." So, yeah, definitely a different Shae than in the book, although there are some similarities. I'm only a quarter of the way into book 3, but there's some similarities between book Shae and show Shae. They're not completely different, but they're somewhat different. Anyway, Shae in the book never pulled a knife from anybody. I'll just put it that way. Just a little more docile, I guess we'll say. But then when they get back, the Hound is there, so all that was for naught, and they didn't manage to hide anything. And of course that flashes forward to Cersei knowing, and Cersei's like, "Well, I'm sure your mother told you about this, right?" And Sansa's trying to cover for how freaked she was by saying she thought it would be less messy, and Cersei says, "Wait till you have a child." And she says, "You do know what this means, though, right?" And she says that means she's fit to bear Joffrey's children, and Joffrey says, "Oh, well, that once delighted you," because obviously Sansa's not thrilled. So Cersei knows that Sansa's lying through her teeth all the time, and she's just, putting up with it because, she's got Sansa as a hostage, which is what she wants anyway, because of Jaime being a hostage. But then she says that Joffrey's always been difficult, and she labored a day and a half and screamed so loud that she thought Robert would hear her in the King's Wood, and Sansa's like, "Oh, Robert wasn't here?" And this is kind of funny. She says, no, every time I was going to have a kid, he'd run off to the Kingswood and bring me back a pelt, and I'd give him a baby when he got back. So he'd present me with a pelt and present him with a baby, is what she said. And she said that although they couldn't keep Jamie away from the birthing room, so, and she says that Joffrey won't show Sansa no such devotion, and she tells her that she may never love Joffrey, but she will love their children. And of course, Sansa does her little, I love Joffrey with all my heart BS again. And Cersei's so sarcastic, she's like, oh, that's so very touching to hear, because she knows Sansa's full of it. Yes, Sansa, you're not very good at this lying thing, are you? And then Cersei's got some great lines here. She says, allow me to share some womanly wisdom with you. And she says, the more people you love, the weaker you are. You'll do things for them that you'd never do otherwise, and that you should love no one but your children. And that's it, and that's all, and nobody else. Kind of is the way Cersei lives her life. None of you really thought she was in love with Jaime, did you? Yeah, Cersei only loves her children, period. But, when Cersei tells her and she should love nobody but her children, Sansa says, well, shouldn't I love Joffrey? And one of my favorite Cersei lines says, oh, you can try. I love that line. So, yeah. That's another scene I like a lot, just because of Cersei finally, admitting that, guess what? Joffrey is an evil little bastard. And she knows it. And she's finally admitting to it, so it's kind of refreshing. But anyway, then after that we go to her twin brother and his escape attempt. This is after they threw Alton in the cage with Jaime. And Jaime doesn't even know how they're related. He's like, who's your mother? It's like, okay, I know we're cousins, but who are you? So, yes, Jaime doesn't even know how they're related. And Alton tells him the story about how he squired for Jaime once, and that he doubts that Jaime remembered, and he volunteered, and he wanted to, be important for once, because Jaime's family are the family. We hear it referred to like that, the family. The other Lannisters are Lannisters, but Jaime's family is the Lannisters. And Alton's father was worried that he'd embarrass him in front of them, and Jaime goes along with this thing, and he compliments him and tells him he was a good squire, and they're having a little friendly chat. Yeah. And the guard comes over, Torrin Karstark, that's the guard. They don't say, he doesn't really have many lines or anything, but he is an important character because of things that happen later. But anyway, the guard shushes them, and Jaime just keeps on talking. And Alton's gushing about how great Jaime was, and Jaime realizes this guy idolizes him, and he's like, I can use this. You can just see it on his face. I can use this. And Alton asks him if Jaime ever squired, or he said something like, oh, you wouldn't know what it's like. You're so good at what you do. And Jaime says, oh, he squired once, and he was a squire for Barristan Selmy when he was 16 years old. But he says that he was no good at it. But Selmy was a painter who only used red. So I believe it's been said to some extent. I don't know how often they refer to it in the show, but there's only been like one knight who's ever been able to beat Barristan Selmy, and it was Arthur Dane, who had a sword made from a falling star. But they said that if Arthur Dane didn't have that sword, it probably wouldn't have been. It would have been a toss-up between the two. But anyway, he mentions that he was 16 when he squired for Barristan, and he would have stayed a squire, except then he killed one of the Kingswood Brotherhood outlaws when he was only 16, and that was his first kill. And then they realized that he should be a knight and all that, and that's when he was knighted. Yeah. So Jaime's first kill was when he was 16. And I think in Season 5 we're going to find out how young somebody else was when they made their first kill. But anyway, unless they leave that out, we'll see. But then Jamie says something here, it's a little foreshadowy. He says that he's useless at anything but being a knight and being a fighter. He's useless at anything other than using a sword. A little bit foreshadowy, but we'll see. And this is where he tells Elton that he can now that he's there, he can help him escape because he's not well suited to being prisoner, and all Elton has to do is die. And then he beats him to death to get the guard to come over. So yeah, turn on a dime, having a friendly little chat, and then he beats him to death to escape. And then when Torrhen Karstark comes over and to see what happened, Jamie, of course, strangles him with his chains and gets out. So, there you go. So that's how Jamie gets out. And of course, if you've seen the rest of the episode, you know that that doesn't last very long, but still, that's how it happened. But that will lead us to a really good Jamie scene, which is one of my favorite scenes later. But anyway, then Jorah goes to see Kaith, because she's the one that has prophecies and visions and knows stuff, the Shadowbinder from Ashai, Kaith. And she's putting protection tattoos on this guy because he's supposed to sail past Valyria across the Smoking Sea, which is supposedly haunted. It's like our Bermuda Triangle. Nobody who goes to the Smoking Sea, which is the only thing that separates the mainland of Essos from Valyria, I believe. Anybody that goes there never is seen again. So it's kind of like our Bermuda Triangle, ever since the Doom. So she's putting protection spells on him because he's to sail past that part. But anyway, Jorah has come over to her to find out if she knows anything about the dragons. And she says that he wants to please Dany and that he loves her. And then she says, will you betray her again, Jorah the Andal? So she's quite aware that Jorah was spying on Dany for most of season 1. Yeah, that kind of catches him off guard. It's like, who is this chick? How does she know I'm a spy? And we still have to this day have yet to find out who Kaith is. Although they did cut out most of the prophecy, she goes Dany, which is a gripe I have in my prophecy video. But anyway, so she tells Dany that, or no, tells Jorah that the thief, the dragon thief, is with Dany now. And so she does know. And then we go to Dany meeting with the 13. So the dragon thief is one of the 13, apparently, is what we got from that. And Xaro's acting like he's Dany's ally at the beginning of the scene. The Spice King is insulted because she's accusing them of stealing her dragons, and she's begging them to return them. And she says, "Oh," and one of them says, "Oh, weren't you just threatening us a few days ago, and now you're begging us?" And Dany tries to tell them that the dragons will die without her. And the Spice King says it's for the best, because her dragons will only bring death and misery to the world. Yeah, those are my favorite characters, the dragons. But anyway, and Pyatt says that he's cruel and that Dany must be with her babies. And then he says that he'll take Dany to her dragons. And he will take her to the House of the Undying, which is where he put them. Because it was part of an arrangement he made with the King of Qarth. And Dany says, what are you talking about? There is no King of Qarth. And they say, well, that was the other part of the arrangement. So if Xaro helped Pyatt get the dragons, Pyatt would kill the 13 and make Xaro the king. As long as he got the dragons and Dany, he would kill the 13 and let Xaro rule. And he says that the mother of dragons will be with her babies. She'll be by their side, and they'll thrive with her. And then he says forever, and it gets all echoey when he says that. And then suddenly there's like 15 of him all around the room, and they each slit one of the 13's throats. And there's one at the door. So the 13's dead. The only two left are Pyatt and Xaro, who've come to this agreement to rule Karth without the rest of them getting in the way. And yeah, it was different. In the book, I think it's the Pureborn that rule Karth, but they're not even on the show, so that's beside the point. Anyway, that's part of the whole House of the Undying thing. Like I said, that's the one thing they changed majorly on the show, and that's my one complaint about Dany's storyline this year. I really don't like how they took a lot of the stuff out of the House of the Undying episode, which is coming up in 2 episodes. We get to see the House of the Undying, I believe. But anyway, so Hyatt's popped up all over the room and killed all the 13 and is at the door. And of course, Dany and I think the one Dothraki she still has is named Ago, but I'm not positive. They make a run for it, and Hyatt's at the door, and he's like, "Where are you going to run to, Daenerys Stormborn, or Daenerys Targaryen?" And she says, "The dragons are waiting for you in the House of the Undying. Come see them." And she's just trying to get out of there because she's freaked out because he just killed, like, over a dozen people so, who were supposedly his friends. And as her and Ago, I think, are trying to get out the door, there's another Pyat Pri by the door, and then Jorah comes up behind from outside and stabs him from behind as Dany and the Dothraki guy are trying to get out, and he just falls into a pile of cloth on the floor. He was an illusion as well. So it looks like the Warlocks have more than parlor tricks. Zaro goes back to this whole dragons connected to magic thing. That's made a little more clear in the books too, is they say that none of the magic in the world was real after the dragons died. It just started fading away. And then, and the dragons came back, all the magic started coming back. So there's a big, huge connection between the dragons and the magic. Dragons die, magic dies. Dragons are reborn, magic comes back. So that's why the world is very, very, very slowly changing back to the way it used to be, with the White Walkers and Children of the Forest and the sorcerers and greensteers and all this magic stuff that used to exist. It all went away with the dragons. And now it's all starting to come back because the dragons have come back. So these dragons coming back are a big, big, big thing. So, like I said, it's made a little clearer, but you kind of get it from the show, but it's flat out said, I think, in the book that, you know, the dragons being reborn are responsible for magic being reborn. So, anyway, like I said, Jorah stabs the guy and he falls down. He's nothing but an illusion, and they get out of there as well, with the guy yelling after them about how Dany needs to come to the House of the Undying to be with her dragons and all that fun. So, yeah, Dany's still having lots of luck with trusting people. Isn't she? Oh my. Fun times. So, we're getting that Dany's got to go to the House of the Undying to get her dragons back, but it's obviously seeming like it's kind of a trap. But we shall see how it turns out. And like I said, the House of the Undying is very different in the show than it was in the books. But don't worry, when we get to it, I'll help explain it. See my prophecy video. But anyway, then we go back to Rob's camp, and the soldier comes in to tell Cat that Jaime's been caught again. So, he's a prisoner again. And Rickard Karstark, basically he's out there trying to kill Jaime, or about to kill Jaime. And Cat stops it. She says that she's the mother of the king and he has to listen to her. And he said, "Where's the king? I don't see the king." And she says he went to the crag to negotiate, you know that. And then Karstark says no, he's not going there to negotiate. He brought that foreign bitch with him. So, yeah, they're not happy with Rob following Talisa around like a little lost puppy dog. And I can't say that I'm happy with it either, because it's not the smartest thing to do, Rob. But anyway, he says that when Rob comes back, Karstark's going to demand Jaime's head. And Catelyn tells him that wise men don't make demands of kings, and And Karstark says that fathers who love their sons do. And, of course, Jaime being all snarky is like, thank you for fighting for my honor there, Catelyn, or fighting for my life. And he tells her, you've become a real she-wolf. There's not much fish left in you. Oh, Jaime's always got fun lines when he's talking to Catelyn. There's some kind of sexual tension between them. Fan fiction. Have fun. But anyway, and of course, Catelyn just screams at them to take him back to the stockades. And when he's saying stuff after her, and she's like, and gag him. So she doesn't want to hear Jaime's smart little comments either. But yeah, basically the gist of this is Robb's not there. Jaime tried to escape. They got him again, but Karstark wants to kill him, and Karstark's men want to kill him because he killed Karstark's son, or two of his sons. He killed one in the battlefield, and then he strangled the one to get out. So you can see there's a little bit of trouble among the ranks. Things are falling apart a little bit. And Robb following around some girl who he's not engaged to is not going to help things. They're not happy about that either. And they're not happy about her keeping them from killing Jaime. And they all want to kill Jaime, but at the same time, if they kill Jaime, her kids, her daughters, who she believes are both at King's Landing, will both be killed, because Jaime is their only leverage. But she makes a good point here, where she says that killing Jaime won't bring Karstark's son back, but it might give her daughters the chance to live. But of course they don't see it that way. And then, back to Jaime's twin, Cersei. And I like this scene a lot too. Basically, the whole thing here is Stannis has been, Tyrion tells Cersei that Stannis has been spotted with 200 ships, which is more than they have, and he'll be there in 4 or 5 days. And Cersei's quoting their father and saying that he mentions that, and she says, well, he has a good mind for strategy, and Tyrion says, oh, well, we call it tactics, not strategy. But he says, no, but sadly, our father's not here, it's just you, me, and Joffrey. And, of course, you can see the sarcasm in that statement. And he says that Joffrey needs to start acting like a king, and the entire city hates them. And Cersei just says, well, I'm not the one giving him whores to abuse. And Tyrion starts with, I know, I made a mistake. And he says, if we can't control it, and Cersei interrupts and she's like, he doesn't listen to me. And Tyrion has another good line, says it's hard to put a leash on a dog once you put a crown on his head. Yeah. And then Cersei goes into this thing where she says that she had hoped that Joffrey would be like Jaime. And Tyrion says he's more like Robert than Jaime, because Robert was all war happy. But Cersei points out that Robert was a drunken fool, but he didn't enjoy cruelty. And then she says this thing. The reason I'm going through it a little fast is because I have a little bit of an issue with this scene, or the way some people think of this scene. I like this scene. But she says that sometimes she wonders if this is the price for their sins. Joffrey being the way he is. And of course the sin she's referring to is the incest. And Tyrion tries to reassure her and says, well, Tommen and Myrcella are sweet children. And she says, yes, I know, but half the Targaryens went mad, didn't they? And she mentions this old saying about every time a Targaryen's born, the gods flip a coin. And she actually starts crying because of how Joffrey has turned out, and how he is so cruel and such a horrible, horrible king, and impossible to control. And she's just finally facing it, that this is not what she wanted, for Joffrey to be this way and be this impossible and get them in this much of a problem with the kingdom and the war and everything else. And she knows that it's all Joffrey's fault for being the way he is. And she starts to cry, and Tyrion tries to comfort her, but because they hate each other so much, they can't do it. He goes over to her, but then it falls flat. He can't do it. Now, the reason I rushed to get to that point is because I love this scene. Because most people, show watchers and book watchers alike, say one of the best things about this show is that the characters are all very gray. There's no characters that are all good or all bad. I mean, maybe one or two like Joffrey, but the characters are very gray. They have many layers. And that's why I like the scene, because you get to see a very human side of Cersei for once. And book people have a problem with it, because they say that Cersei's not that human. The whole point was to make all the characters human, and that's why I like that scene, because Cersei is very human in that scene. So I like it a lot. The book people say, oh, it makes her too gray, when in the next sentence they're saying how all the characters are gray. But I like that scene because it does humanize her. So anyway, speaking of that, we go back to her twin, and we get to see his perspective on things too. This is his big oath speech, and they actually did this on his birthday. They filmed this on his birthday. He's looking forward to this. It's the most dialogue he ever had, and he was looking so forward to doing this scene. But it's really good. The men are all fighting, of course. They all want Jaime's blood, and they mention that Robb is going to return at dawn, and Catelyn and Brienne are saying they don't think that Jaime's going to make it till dawn. And Catelyn orders the guards to go away, and of course, Jaime, being his typical sarcastic self, he's looking at Brienne and says, "Is that a woman?" And they want his head, and he said that he doesn't think that old Lord Karstark likes him very much, and he says because you killed his sons. And he's like, oh, is he the one that was guarding? Well, he was in my way. And he says any knight would have done the same thing. And Catelyn says, you are no knight. You've forsaken every vow you've ever taken. And he says, this is the part I love. He says, there's so many vows. And he goes on this thing, he's like, you're supposed to love your father and serve the king and protect the innocent and weak and protect the king and all this other stuff. And he says that, what if the king hates your father? What if the king murders the innocent? Everything you do, you're going to break one vow or another. So, basically, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, kind of thing, because that is exactly what happened to him. The king hated his father. How is he supposed to protect his father and the king? The king murdered the innocent and the weak. How is he supposed to serve the king and protect the innocent and the weak? So, it's very, very, it explains it very well. How, no matter what he did, he was going to be betraying somebody. So, that's kind of like what happened with Cersei. He could let Cersei get in trouble, or he could start this big, conflict with the Starks. That's back in episode 1. He had to make that decision between saving his sister's honor and saving the realm from war. So he had to do one or the other, and he chose his sister. So, yeah, everything he does, it's going to be a problem for somebody else. And Catelyn, of course, calls him Kingslayer again. He says, oh, and what a king he was. And she says that he has no honor, and he says that he's only been with Cersei, which makes him more honorable than poor old dead Ned, because, of course, Jon's supposed to be Ned's bastard son, and he knows that that's Catelyn's weak point. He's like, what was that bastard's name again that Ned had? And Catelyn's, like, clenching her teeth and saying, Brienne? He's like, no, that's not it. That's another funny line. And she asks for her sword, and he said, did you pretend to love that baby? No, of course you didn't. You hated that boy. He's the walking, talking reminder of Ned being with another woman. So he knows exactly how to get to Catelyn. And if Jon was actually Ned's son, I guess he'd have a point. But, I'm not giving any spoilers away because they still, to this day, have not told anybody about Jon's parents. But anyway, still, he knows exactly how to get to Catelyn. Then, our final scene of the episode. Yes, our final scene of the episode. So, in this scene is the aftermath of the hunt that led to the farm with the 2 little farm boys that Bran sent to help that guy. And how they found the walnut shells and then sent one home. And he comes back to Winterfell and says, I warned you that if you were loyal, I'd be good to you, but I also warned you what would happen if you weren't loyal. And now here's proof that I meant what I said. Here's the answer to what would happen if you weren't weren't loyal. And he hoists up the bodies, burnt to a crisp and hanging. And of course, everybody knows who those bodies most likely are. So that is Theon's answer for disloyalty. I guess the disloyalty of trying to escape from being prisoners, that disloyalty. I don't know, but anyway, that's Theon's solution to what happens if you don't want to give in and let him run things and take over your home and, take the family that raised him hostages. This is his solution to what happens if you don't go along with that. So, is the man without honor Jaime? Or is it Theon? Title placement, but hey, there was title placement in the Jaime and Catelyn scene, and it was insinuated that she was talking about Jaime, but considering the way the episode ends, was she really talking about Jaime? Or was she talking about Theon? Anybody think Theon's honorable? Anybody? Maybe the people that think Stannis is honorable might think Theon's honorable. I don't know. Yes, I still have a major gripe about people that like Stannis. But luckily, Stannis was not in this episode. Anyway, so that is the end of episode 7 of season 2, A Man Without Honor. So there you go. Again, I have just started reading the 3rd book. I just finished the 24th chapter of the 3rd book. So I've been spending a lot of time doing that, so I haven't been spending as much time trying to get the reviews done. But anyway, I will still try to get us caught up to season 5 before season 5 starts. Although I probably won't be able to do the season 4 reviews until the season 4 DVD set comes out in February or March. Unless I just get rid of the screen caps, because I need the DVDs in order to do the screen caps. But we still have 3 more episodes of season 2 and 10 episodes of season 3. So we've got a little bit of time, and I am on the 3rd book, still trying to decide what to do with the 4th and 5th book, because I don't want to read ahead, but by the end of season 4, all the characters are in 3 different books, so reading ahead for one character is not reading ahead for another character, so it's kind of hard to tell how I should go about doing that. We shall see, because I don't ever want to become one of those book people that hate the show because it doesn't match their imagination. But anyway, I will try to get the next one out to you as soon as possible. Hopefully you'll stick around and watch it as well. And please like, subscribe, and make comments. Bye all.